Um, my name, everybody calls me Peg,
Okay.
but my name is really Margaret Briscoe hyphen Jensen. Now the Briscoe was the love of my life. And when I married a second time, I wouldn't give up that name. That's why it's hyphenated.
Okay.
And I'm at the Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of Shell Point.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to say how old you are or not?
Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm 93 years old.
That's great.
Tell us about your spiritual journey, Peg.
Well, I guess I'd have to start with my mother and father, who never went to church. And it kind of bothered me because I never went to Sunday school. And when I married Jim, who was the love of my life, he had been an Episcopalian from birth. So I decided to join the Episcopal Church before we got married.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did. So we went to church, and in my early days, I accepted Christ as my Savior. But God was way up there someplace. I really didn't know much about God. And this bothered me to a degree. So I think I wanted to know something about him, but I wasn't really that anxious. So one day we were in church, and I decided to talk to God. And there was some scripture that I hadn't possibly heard before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And it said that God's first commandment was to love him with all your heart and so forth and so on. Well, I thought about that, and I said, God, I love Jim that much with all my heart, and I love the children that much, but I don't love you that much. I never had thought much about it. Well, you can't love somebody that you don't know. And I said, I don't know you that well, but I sure would like to. Well, we were planning on taking a couple days vacation and going to Williamsburg. But the next morning, my husband said, Peg, do you see anything that looks like I've been stung? And I looked at his neck and I didn't see anything. Well, before the day was over, he was running fever. And he had it began to swell. So I said, Jim, we're going to go to the doctor. And we had a family doctor, and I called him, and we decided to go to the doctor. Well, by the time we got there, he was running fever about 104. And I didn't realize he was that sick. And and his neck was swollen. And the doctor said, Jim, you had the mumps.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim said, I couldn't have the mumps. I've had them on both sides. And he said, well, if you don't have the mumps, I tell you, I have no idea what you have. I'm going to send you into University of Maryland Hospital. Well, now, our home was about 28 miles from Baltimore. So I took him into the hospital. I can't remember the name of the doctor anymore. It's been so long ago. But anyway, that was that until the next day. Well, I went in to see him the next morning, and he was really, really swollen. All under his chin was way out beyond his chin. And he was about half delirious because his fever was so high. Well, this went on for 2 weeks, and I was worried to death about him. I just had no idea what it was, and they didn't seem to have any idea what it was either. And so at about 10 days, the doctor came in to see me, and he said, "Mrs. Briscoe, I'd like to see you in the hall." So when I went out in the hall, and he said, "I think you better be prepared to lose Mr. Briscoe, because he can't take this fever at his age." Now, he was about 50, and I didn't think he was old. But anyway, the doctor said, he is ill, and we don't have any idea what's wrong with him. Now, University of Maryland was a teaching hospital, and I thought they should certainly know what's wrong with him or know what to do for him. But they'd given him all kinds of medicine, and it just didn't do any good. Well, I went out in the car. It was about time for me to go home, and I had been staying with a cousin in Baltimore rather than go back and forth every night. But that night I was going home because I wanted to do laundry and I had things to take care of. Well, I got out in the car and I got to talking to the Lord, and I said, "God, if you take Jim, I don't know what I'll do. I can't even take the garbage out." We owned a little valley, and we had about a quarter of a mile to the county road through the valley. And I said, "I can't carry the garbage out. I don't know what I'll ever do without him." And just as though the Lord were sitting beside me, I heard this voice that said, "But I'll never leave you." Now that is amazing. And I knew it had to be God because I didn't have anybody else in the car with me. And the voice was so plain. And I said, "Oh God, that's the most wonderful promise I've ever had." I just didn't know what to do or what to think. But anyway, I said to him, "God, I tell you what, that's the most wonderful promise I've ever had. And if you want Jim, I'm going to give him to you. Now, I know you could take him anyway, but I'm going to give him to you willingly. And I'll never say, 'Why did this happen to me?' And I'll never blame you for it." And with that, all this worry just sort of lifted off of me. And I just felt wonderful. Well, I went on home, and I felt peaceful, and I felt like everything was all right, and I didn't have anything to worry about. Well, when I got home, my aunt called because she knew I was coming home that night, and she said, "Don't stay out there in the country alone." She said, "Come in here with us." And I said, "No, I'm fine." and I have things that I have to take care of. So I did my laundry and what have you. And when I got ready for bed, I got down on my knees and I made the same promise to God. I said, God, if you want Jim, you take him, and I will never blame you, and I'll never say, why did this happen to me? And I went to bed, and I slept like a log, and I hadn't slept for a week without waking up time and time again. Well, I woke up in the morning, and the sun was shining bright. It was a beautiful, and it was Sunday. It was a beautiful Sunday. And I got ready to go into the hospital. And when I walked into Jim's room, he was normal. The swelling had gone down. He didn't have any fever. I said, Jim, what happened? He said, well, I'll tell you. In the middle of the night, I got awake, and I didn't have a bit of fever. And I felt my neck, and it was all the swelling was gone. And he said, you know what? He said, Peg, I think God was standing in my room last night. And I said, I'm sure he was, because I gave you to him.
What a story.
And I tell you, I didn't have any trouble loving the Lord from then on with all my heart, because he gave me 35 more years
Wow.
with the man I loved.
Wow.
You had another experience with Jim that was also an enormous step of faith
Yeah.
and of God's proving himself to you.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
Well, sometime about, I have to stop and think now. This has been a long time ago. I went, we went to Montreat, North Carolina, to a Christian gathering. My brother had called and asked if we'd like to go. And he said there was an Episcopal minister there that he thought I'd like to hear. So I asked Jim, you want to go up to Montreat? And he said, sure. And our son was there with us at the time. He had just had a hernia operation, and he wasn't doing anything. And he said, oh, I want to go too. So the three of us went to Montreat. Well, they had all kinds of things. And we didn't, all three of us didn't go to the same gatherings. There were healings, there was all sorts of things. Well, it was from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We went home Sunday. Well, we started home, and I'm talking to the Lord, and I'm driving on a 4-lane highway. And I said, oh, Lord, if only Jim had gone to one of the healing ministries. Maybe, I missed telling you what the problem was. He had an itch on his back, that on the small of his back, that had been bothering him for weeks. He'd come home from work and he'd barely stop the car before he'd run to go in to take a cold shower, because that was the only thing that laid the itching. And he had scratched his back to such a degree that the dermatologist said he would carry a scar forever. And his undershirts were full of blood every time I washed them. And this had gone on. And I had said to him when we got ready to leave for Montreat, now don't forget to take your medicine. he was taking something, I've forgotten, but it stopped, it did help the itching. And he said, I don't have any more of those pills. He said, I should have gotten that prescription filled and I didn't do it. And I said, oh, Jim, now we're going down to Montreat and you won't half enjoy yourself. You'll be jumping up in the middle of the night and standing in a cold shower. And oh, I was really upset with him. Well, anyway, we took off. And we did have a really nice time. But when the time came to come home on Sunday, I was driving, and we were on a 4-lane highway, and Jim was scratching, and I was talking to the Lord again, and I said, Lord, if he had gone to one of the healing services, he maybe would have been healed, and he could have stopped this scratching. And this voice said to me from way up here, you do it. I said, I can't do it. I've never done anything like that. You do it. It was a little bit louder. And I said, oh, Lord, I can't lay hands on him. I've never done anything like that. And then the voice was really loud, you do it. And I knew it had to be the Lord. It couldn't have been anything else because nobody else heard it but me. And with that, I'm looking, driving and looking at this, and I didn't have any, and I went, and Jim said, what are you doing? Because I cut across 4 lanes of highway, because I had seen a stopping place, like a
rest stop?
Yeah, like a rest stop, and I wanted to go in there, and I said, Doug, will you pray with me for Dad? He said, sure. And my son, Doug, loves the Lord. And I said, we're going to pray for you because the Lord had told me that we should pray for you. And he said, oh, Peg. So I pulled in a vacant space there, and Doug and I laid hands on Jim. And we didn't have a long prayer, but I was just asking the Lord to please heal him so he didn't itch all the time. Well, when we finished praying, which didn't take us very long, we started home, and it was late when we got home. We stopped for dinner, and I tell you the truth, I didn't even think about it. We had dinner and we went to bed when we got home. And the next morning I woke up and I said, I wonder if he's been helped any. And I said, Jim, wake up. And I said, turn over. And I pulled his pajama top down, and his back was beautiful. It looked like a baby's behind. He didn't have a scar or didn't have a thing. And I let out a hoop for Doug. I said, Doug, come quick, come quick. And poor Doug wondered what had happened, and he jumped out of bed. He was just up the hall. And he came down. I said, look at Dad's back. And we're all just this way. So I have a lot to be grateful for.
Oh.
And to this day, years later, I never fail to thank the Lord at night for those 2 healings.
Right. Amen.
Sometimes, Peg, I've talked to you and maybe you haven't been feeling too well or something, and I'll say something about being worried about something, and what do you tell me when I ask you if you're worried about something?
I never worry about anything.
Why?
I just trust the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I never worry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like He's in charge, and why should I worry?
Mm-hmm. What do you think you've learned through the hard things that have happened in your life?
I don't know. I certainly don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some terrible things happen in our family, but I just don't worry about it.
Why not?
Well, I figure the Lord's going to be taking care of everything, and whatever's to be is going to be.
Is there anything you look forward to still in life now? Anything you look forward to being ahead of you?
Well, I hope when the time comes for me to die that I just go to sleep and don't suffer a lot of pain, because I'm not very good with pain.
So dying isn't something that you worry about either.
Oh, good heavens, no, I look forward to it.
You look forward to it, okay? Explain that.
Well, Jim had accepted Christ, and I knew that he had, and I had, and I just look forward to being with Jim again.
And you're sure that that's where you'll be?
I think so.
I think you're right.
Because when Jim died, I didn't shed a tear, because the minute I looked at him, I knew he'd seen heaven. And he had the most wonderful look on his face. And I just knew he'd seen heaven.
Yeah. You've surely walked with God long enough to know that God's not going to just leave you when you die, but He'll take you.
I hope. I think he will. And I think I'll see Jim again.
I believe that too, Peg. I believe that. How do you experience God in your life now, at this stage?
Well, I just have peace all the time, and I don't worry about anything, and I talk to him about things, and he's always there.
Do you always just feel on top of everything and like you don't have any aches or pains or any problems?
Well, I don't have any aches or pains. I'm really very fortunate to be this age and have no aches and pains. But I don't feel great all the time. I'm tired a lot of the time. And I have this darn mail drives me crazy.
I know.
Look at it.
I know. And it's mostly asking for money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Peg, what would you say are the most important principles by which you've lived in your life?
Well, I don't know. I really believe the second what I want to say, to treat other people like I want to be treated. And I'm not very good at criticizing. I don't criticize people. And I don't know.
If you were given the chance to give one piece of advice to a young person today, what would it be?
It would be to trust God.
Okay.
And I hope that, of course I know, I feel like if I say to a young person to trust God, that it's not going to make any impression because they don't know Him any better than I did.
So what made the difference?
Oh, well, what made the difference was when I trusted God, when I gave Jim over to Him and He gave him back to me. I had 35 years, more
Right.
to live with Him, which I just loved. And I don't think we ever had an argument.
Wow.
And I said that to the children one time, and they said, "Oh, Mom, I think you did. I think you argued, but I don't think we did."
You don't remember any arguments anyway. So if you did have them, they weren't very important.
Yeah, that's right.
That's wonderful. A wonderful story of faith and of obedience to God.
Well, you can't beat God at His own game.
True. Oh yeah, that's so true.
And I see a lot of people that try. They just don't pay any attention to Him, and it disturbs me.
It's sad, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But some of my very best friends don't pay any attention to God.
Do you have anything, Paul, that you think of?
No, I was just thinking about my granddaughters, what she would tell them, and you've already asked her that. So
Okay.
that's great. Great stories. Thank
Well,
you.
I've told I've told that story to a good many people, and hoping that it would mean something to them. And I'm never sure that it does.
Maybe you can't tell, but it's got to have some kind of impact, even if they're not showing it at the time. Thinking about your own grandchildren, great-grandchildren, what do you want them to remember you for?
Oh, I just guess just for being me. I think that my grandchildren know that I love the Lord, and
So, for being you, for your faith, your love of God, and I think your love of your children and grandchildren too. You tell me about them with great pride and love.
yep. And now I have another great-grandchild that's going to be born any minute
Oh my goodness.
in
Okay.
June or July.
So this is going to be for that great-grandchild someday. That's wonderful. Thanks, Peg. Thanks for sharing that.